Imagine a mountain that has defeated every climber who's ever considered it, not through sheer difficulty, not through impossible weather, but through something far more powerful: collective human reverence. While thousands line up each year to attempt Everest, risking everything for a chance at the summit, there exists a peak that stands taller than most of the Alps, yet remains absolutely untouched by human feet. No boot prints mar its snowy crown, no flags wave from its apex, no selfies have ever been taken from its summit. This isn't because it's impossible to climb, it's because humanity has collectively decided that some places are too sacred to conquer. Today, we're diving deep into the extraordinary story of Mount Kailash, a mountain that sits at the intersection of faith, ecology, geopolitics, and human consciousness itself. This is the story of how a single mountain became holy to over 1 billion people across 4 major religions. It's about the rivers that flow from its base and sustain half of Asia. It's about the geological forces that built it and the climate forces that now threaten it. But most importantly, it's about what Mount Kailash reveals about humanity's relationship with nature, the sacred, and the limits we choose to place on our own ambitions. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll explore why this mountain matters more today than ever before, not just as a religious symbol, but as a case study in what happens when spirituality, ecology, and geopolitics collide in one of the most remote corners of our planet. To understand Mount Kailash, we first need to understand where it is, because its location is almost impossibly perfect for the role it plays in human imagination. Rising to just over 21,000 feet above sea level, Kailash sits in the Mari prefecture of Tibet, in what geographers call the Trans-Himalaya. This is crucial to understand. Kailash isn't part of the main Himalayan range. It's separate, isolated, standing in its own sub-range called the Kailash Range, which gives it a kind of solitary majesty that's difficult to describe until you see it. The mountain itself is composed primarily of metasedimentary rock, resting on a granite base. This tells us something important about its history. These rocks were once sediments at the bottom of an ancient ocean, compressed and transformed by heat and pressure, then thrust upward when the Indian subcontinent crashed into Asia roughly 50 million years ago. Every stone in Mount Kailash contains the memory of that colossal collision, one of the most dramatic geological events in Earth's recent history. The mountain is literally a monument to the power of plate tectonics, though most pilgrims who circle its base are contemplating entirely different forms of power. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about Mount Kailash, from a geographical perspective, isn't the mountain itself, it's what flows from it. Within a relatively compact area around Kailash, 4 of Asia's greatest river systems begin their journeys. The Indus flows west and south through India and Pakistan. The Sutlej, a major tributary of the Indus, also originates here. The Brahmaputra begins its eastward journey through Tibet before turning south through India and Bangladesh. And the Kagera River, which eventually joins the Ganges, starts its course from this same region. Think about what this means. These 4 river systems provide water for agriculture, drinking, transportation, and cultural practices for well over 1 billion people. The waters that begin near Mount Kailash eventually flow through farms in Punjab, villages in Bangladesh, cities in Tibet, and the plains of northern India. The mountain isn't just spiritually vital to these regions, it's hydrologically essential. In a very real sense, Mount Kailash sustains human civilization across a vast swath of Asia, making it both a spiritual and practical axis around which countless lives revolve. Near the mountain lie 2 lakes that play their own roles in the sacred geography of the region. Manasarovar, one of the highest freshwater lakes on Earth, sits at about 15,000 feet. Its waters are considered purifying and holy in both Hindu and Buddhist traditions. Pilgrims bathe in the lake as part of their journey, seeking spiritual cleansing. In contrast, Roxastal, nearby saltwater lake, carries darker symbolism in some traditions, representing the shadow side of the sacred landscape. Together, these bodies of water create a complete symbolic ecosystem around Mount Kailash, a landscape that seems designed for contemplation and ritual. What makes Mount Kailash truly unique isn't its geology or its rivers. It's the fact that 4 major religious traditions spanning billions of believers across centuries all consider this exact same mountain to be among the holiest places on Earth. This convergence is almost unprecedented in religious history. Let's explore how each tradition understands Kailash, because their different perspectives reveal something profound about how humans construct meaning from landscape. For Hindus, Mount Kailash is the earthly home of Lord Shiva, one of the principal deities of the Hindu pantheon. Shiva embodies destruction and renewal, representing the cosmic force that breaks down the old to make way for the new. Hindu texts describe him sitting in eternal meditation on Kailash's summit, accompanied by his consort Parvati. The mountain is often equated with Mount Meru, the mythical center of the universe in Hindu cosmology, the axis around which all creation revolves. Ancient epics like the Ramayana and Mahabharata reference Kailash, weaving it into stories involving divine beings like Kubera, the god of wealth, who is said to maintain his celestial city near the mountain. Hindu tradition holds that seeing Mount Kailash and completing the arduous circumambulation around it can bring moksha, liberation from the endless cycle of death and rebirth that characterizes existence. This isn't just symbolic. For devout Hindus, the journey to Kailash represents the pinnacle of spiritual aspiration, a chance to encounter the divine in its most concentrated earthly form. Some stories even claim that the sacred Ganges River first descended to earth at Kailash, flowing through Shiva's matted hair before spreading across the Indian subcontinent. Whether understood literally or metaphorically, these narratives establish Kailash as the point where heaven touches earth. Tibetan Buddhism offers a different but equally profound understanding of the mountain. Known in Tibetan as Gang Rinpoche, meaning precious jewel of snow, the mountain is identified with Mount Meru in Buddhist cosmology, just as it is in Hindi tradition, though the specific theological meanings differ. Buddhists regard Kailash as the home of Demchok, also called Chakra Samvara, a tantric deity representing supreme bliss and the union of wisdom and compassion. The mountain embodies the Buddhist concept of the enlightened mind, unchanging and pure amid the chaos of existence. The practice of circumambulating the mountain, called Kora in Tibetan, is central to Buddhist engagement with Kailash. Walking the 52-kilometer circuit around the mountain is believed to cleanse negative karma and accelerate progress towards enlightenment. Some devoted practitioners complete the circuit through full-body prostrations, a journey that can take weeks and represents total physical and spiritual surrender. Tibetan legends tell of the great yogi Milarepa meditating at Kailash and engaging in a spiritual contest with a practitioner of the older Bon religion. As per the story, Milarepa reached the summit through spiritual power alone, a mythic account that reinforces the mountain's role as a site of meditation, transformation, and transcendent realization. Jainism, one of India's ancient religions emphasizing non-violence and spiritual liberation, knows Kailash as Ashtapada. According to Jain tradition, this is where Rishabhanatha, the first of the 24 Tirthankaras, or spiritual teachers, achieved moksha, complete liberation from the cycle of rebirth. For Jains, this makes Kailash a site of ultimate spiritual victory, a place where the highest goal of existence was first achieved. While some Jain scholars debate whether the scriptural Ashtapada refers to this exact mountain or another location, many Jains still undertake pilgrimage to Kailash as a profound act of devotion and a connection to their faith's most ancient roots. The Bon religion, Tibet's indigenous spiritual tradition that predates Buddhism's arrival in the region, has perhaps the longest continuous relationship with Mount Kailash. For Bon practitioners, Kailash is nothing less than the spiritual center of the universe, the dwelling of Tunpa Shenrab Miwoche, the founder of their tradition. Bon cosmology holds that hundreds of deities inhabit the mountain and its surrounding landscape, making it a realm where the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds becomes permeable. Interestingly, Bon pilgrims circumambulate the mountain counterclockwise, the opposite direction from Hindu and Buddhist pilgrims, a practice that dates back centuries and distinguishes their ritual approach from later traditions. This convergence of four distinct religious traditions on a single mountain creates a fascinating dynamic. Pilgrims from different faiths walk the same path, gaze at the same peak, and seek transformation from the same landscape, yet they carry entirely different theological frameworks and spiritual narratives. A Hindu pilgrim sees Shiva's abode. A Buddhist sees the manifestation of enlightened mind. A Jain sees
Understanding Mount Kailash as an idea is one thing. Understanding it as a lived experience is something else entirely. Every year, thousands of pilgrims undertake the journey to Kailash, and their stories reveal what this mountain means beyond theology and geography. The pilgrimage isn't easy. It never has been. That difficulty is part of the point. The journey typically begins long before pilgrims reach the mountain itself. For Indians and Nepalis, getting to the Tibetan plateau requires crossing some of the world's highest mountain passes, navigating political complexities between nations, and securing permits from Chinese authorities. The route often takes pilgrims through Kathmandu, then overland through Tibet, a journey that can take days or weeks depending on the chosen path. For Tibetan pilgrims, the journey might be shorter in distance, but no less demanding, as they travel across the harsh plateau landscape to reach the mountain. Once at Kailash, the main ritual practice is the circumambulation, the circuit around the mountain's base. The path covers roughly 52 kilometers and crosses the Dalma La Pass at over 18,000 feet. For most pilgrims, completing the circuit takes 2 or 3 days, though exceptionally fit individuals can do it in one long day. The trail is rugged, the altitude is punishing, and the weather can turn dangerous without warning. Pilgrims often describe a state of physical exhaustion that paradoxically opens them to spiritual experience, as if the body's struggle clears space for something else to emerge. The direction of travel matters immensely. Hindu and Buddhist pilgrims move clockwise around the mountain, a practice called pradakshina in Sanskrit and kora in Tibetan. This clockwise movement is considered auspicious, a way of harmonizing with cosmic forces. Jain and Bon pilgrims, however, move counterclockwise, following their own ancient traditions. This means that on the same path, pilgrims moving in opposite directions regularly pass each other, a living embodiment of the mountain's ability to accommodate different approaches to the sacred. For many pilgrims, Lake Manasarovar is an essential part of the journey. Located at nearly 15,000 feet, the lake is revered in both Hindu and Buddhist traditions as a source of purification. Pilgrims bathe in its frigid waters despite the altitude and temperature, believing that immersion cleanses spiritual impurities and brings blessings. Some spend days at the lakeside in meditation and prayer before attempting the mountain circuit. The combination of the lake's stillness and the mountain's commanding presence creates a landscape that seems to exist outside ordinary time, a quality that pilgrims consistently describe in their accounts. The physical challenges of the pilgrimage are significant, but they're understood as integral to its spiritual value. The thin air makes every step laborious. The cold penetrates even good equipment. The altitude can cause headaches, nausea, and disorientation. Yet pilgrims speak of these difficulties not as obstacles, but as opportunities for surrender, for letting go of the ego's demands and opening to something larger. The circuit becomes a kind of moving meditation, a practice where the body's limitations reveal the mind's attachments. Some pilgrims complete the circuit through full-body prostrations, a practice that transforms the 2 or 3 day journey into a weeks-long ordeal. They stand, join their palms, raise them overhead, then lower themselves completely to the ground, marking where their hands touch. They stand at that mark and repeat the process, over and over, for 52 kilometers through dust and mud and snow. This extreme practice is seen as a way of offering the entire body to the spiritual journey, a complete physical commitment to the path of transformation. What happens during these pilgrimages? Accounts vary wildly. Some pilgrims report profound mystical experiences, visions, moments of clarity or union with the divine. Others describe a slow, gradual shift in perspective, a sense of burdens lifting, of grievances becoming less important, of a quiet joy that persists after returning home. Still others complete the circuit with no dramatic experiences at all, yet feel they've honored something important, participated in a tradition that connects them to centuries of seekers who walked the same path. The mountain seems to meet each pilgrim where they are. In recent decades, the pilgrimage has become somewhat easier in logistical terms. Roads have improved, guest houses offer basic shelter, and organized tours handle permits and transportation. Yet the essential experience remains largely unchanged. You still walk the circuit on your own feet. You still face the altitude, the weather, the physical demands. The mountain doesn't care about modern conveniences. It remains exactly what it has always been, a challenging, sacred landscape that demands something from those who approach it. Here's where the story of Mount Kailash diverges sharply from nearly every other significant peak on Earth. At just over 21,000 feet, Kailash is lower than hundreds of Himalayan peaks. It's nearly 8,000 feet lower than Everest. From a purely technical mountaineering perspective, it would likely be challenging, but not impossible to climb. The slopes are steep in places, but not vertical. The weather is harsh, but no worse than peaks that are routinely attempted. With modern equipment and expertise, a skilled climbing team could almost certainly reach the summit. Yet, no one has ever stood on top of Mount Kailash, not in recorded history, not in living memory, not ever. This isn't because governments have physically prevented attempts, though regulations do prohibit climbing. It's because the mountain's sanctity to billions of people creates a moral barrier far stronger than any legal restriction. Even climbers who don't share the religious beliefs of Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, or Bon practitioners recognize that attempting the summit would be an act of profound disrespect to cultures and traditions they may not fully understand, but can still honor. The Chinese government officially prohibits climbing Mount Kailash, a policy that reflects both respect for religious sentiment and recognition of the mountain's unique status. This makes Kailash possibly the only major peak where government prohibition and religious reverence work in complete harmony. The ban isn't controversial because almost no one wants to challenge it. Even the mountaineering community, which has pushed the limits of what's possible on Earth's highest and most dangerous peaks, has collectively agreed that Kailash should remain untouched. There have been occasional reports of individuals or teams expressing interest in climbing Kailash, but these have universally been met with such strong opposition from religious communities and the general public that the ideas never progressed. In 2001, a Spanish mountaineering team reportedly received permission from Chinese authorities to attempt Kailash. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Hindu and Buddhist organizations protested vigorously. The negative response was so overwhelming that the Chinese government revoked the permission and the team never attempted the climb. The incident demonstrated that even in our modern era of conquering nature and pushing boundaries, some boundaries remain sacred. This creates a fascinating paradox. We live in an age where humans have summited Everest thousands of times, where climbers routinely attempt the world's most dangerous peaks, where adventure tourism pushes into ever more remote corners of the planet. We've placed flags on the moon, sent robots to Mars, and explored the deepest ocean trenches. Our species is characterized by the drive to go everywhere, to leave no frontier unexplored. Yet here stands Mount Kailash, lower and likely easier than many peaks that see regular attempts, and it remains completely untouched by human ambition. What does this tell us about ourselves? Perhaps it suggests that the human impulse towards the sacred is at least as strong as the impulse towards conquest, even if it's less celebrated in our dominant cultural narratives. The unclimbed summit of Mount Kailash represents a collective choice to leave something alone, to recognize that some places gain their power precisely from remaining beyond our reach. In a world increasingly characterized by human impact on every ecosystem and landscape, Kailash stands as a counterexample, a place where we've chosen restraint. The mountain's unclimbed status also preserves its symbolic power. A mountain that has been summited, photographed from the top, measured and mapped in every detail, loses a certain mystery. It becomes known, conquered, domesticated in a sense. But Kailash remains wild in a specific way. Its summit exists in human imagination, but not in human experience. It remains what it has always been in the religious traditions that revere it, a place where the divine dwells, untouched and untouchable. Some might argue that this is irrational, that a mountain is just rock and ice, that the summit holds no special qualities that would justify leaving it unclimbed, but this misses the point entirely. The choice to leave Kailash unclimbed isn't about what's physically on the summit, it's about what the unclimbed summit represents. Respect for tradition, recognition of the sacred, acknowledgement that human desires for conquest and achievement don't always take precedence over collective cultural values. In a way, the unclimbed summit is humanity's gift to itself, a reminder that we're capable of restraint, of honoring something beyond our immediate gratification. While billions approach Mount Kailash through the lens of faith, scientists and ecologists see a different but equally compelling story unfolding on its slopes. The Tibetan Plateau, often called the Third Pole because of its massive ice reserves, is warming at more than twice the global average rate. This has profound implications for Mount Kailash and the rivers that originate in its region. Glacial melt is accelerating across the Himalayan